All right, welcome everybody who's on the line internationally. Welcome to the WorldTeach webinar, Teaching and Living in China. Thank you for joining us as we discuss our year-long teaching placements in the Hunan province of China, which will depart this coming August. We have a bunch of listeners on the line, as mentioned, amongst our listeners, new applicants, as well as those who have been accepted into the program and others that are interested in learning more about WorldTeach in China. We also have panelists joining us. So we have two alumni from 2012 and 2013, one of which is still in Hunan, and our current field director. So thank you everyone for joining us. To quickly introduce myself, my name is Nolan Sutker. I'm the Director of Communications and Recruitment here at WorldTeach. And my international teaching experience centered in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, where I was a teacher for 4 years. Next up, we're going to talk about our agenda. So you look at our agenda, we'll spend a few minutes meeting our great panelists and learning a bit about their backgrounds. We'll then get into the specifics of our China program, including our partnership with the Hunan provincial government, why there is a need for WorldTeach volunteers, the funding and support that's provided for volunteers. From there, we'll focus on being in the classroom, how are placements made, and when will you receive them? What teacher and language training will you receive during orientation? What sort of resources will or won't you have in the classroom? We'll discuss the option of the TEFL certification and, most importantly, cultural challenges that our alumni faced in their schools and in the community. After, we'll discuss living in China. What are the housing placements like, and with whom would you be living? What is the monthly stipend? What activities are volunteers involved in outside of the classroom? We'll talk about safety and cultural challenges, and we'll get to hear personal experiences from our alumni that are on the line with us. At the end, we will quickly address volunteer qualifications and the application process before we dedicate time to Q&A with our panelists. Throughout the webinar, you can submit questions through the chat function that you should see on the bottom of your screen. We have staff on the line that are ready to answer your questions, and some we may wait to address until the end as a group. So let's move on. So here we have Serena Nagi on the phone, coming to us all the way from Hunan. Good morning. She is the current field director in Hunan and a previous volunteer. Serena, if you can you tell us why you first decided to join WorldTeach as a volunteer back in 2012 and why China?
Yeah, good morning, everyone, or good evening for you guys, for most of you guys, probably. My name is Serena Nagi. The way I got into WorldTeach was that I was working in the JYA, the Study Abroad office at my school, and I had not yet decided what I wanted to do with my post-graduation life. And then the woman who I was working with, she knew that I had studied Chinese in college, and she knew that I had gone to China abroad and had really enjoyed it. And then the previous field director, his mother used to work at the university I attended. So she had heard that he got the field director position, and she's like, oh, why don't you try teaching in China? And then one of the reasons why that was really appealing to me is because, like I said, I had previous experience in China. So when I was doing my study abroad, people were incredibly kind to me. Part of that is being a foreigner, and they know you're from somewhere else, and they want to support you because you don't have family here. So I was always being taken out to dinner or being shown around town or getting free rides to etc. Like all the places I could think of, and there was just a lot of emotional support for me. And I actually did teach for voluntarily for an organization during my study abroad, and I really enjoyed it. And I think teaching was one of the ways for me to give back to the host community that was really kind to me. So I think that is partially what inspired me to join WorldTeach, because I really wanted to give back to a community that had done me so well. And it was another way to practice my Chinese as well.
So Serena, you said you studied abroad as well in China?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So you were spoiled then and wanted to give back. That's good. That's nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you so much, Serena. Next, we have our couple of alumni on the phone or on the line. First, we have Ashley. Ashley's on here, and Ashley, thanks for being on the line with us tonight. Can you please introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, my name's Ashley. I'm from the Bahamas, 26 years old, and just here to shed some light on the mystery that is China for you guys.
Ashley, you still there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to keep going. Okay. Do you remember how you first learned of WorldTeach and what convinced you to join the program in China?
Well, I had just graduated from the College of the Bahamas, getting my bachelor's degree in marketing management, and I didn't want to just settle down and get a job. So I wanted to travel the world for a little bit because I had just come off of a study abroad program called the Semester at Sea. And so I still had like that little taste for adventure and I wanted more. So what I had done was I looked up different programs that would allow me to teach English abroad, because on a seminar during my study abroad program, I had heard that you can teach English in other countries as an affordable and economical way to travel. And so looking up different programs, I found WorldTeach. It was mentioned in the USA Today as well as other reputable sites. So I was able to just comfortably give my money to the WorldTeach program, knowing that in no way was it a scam or anything like those things that you see on the internet often. And that's basically how I learned about WorldTeach. My own research led me to WorldTeach. Why I did it? Like I said, I didn't want to just sit down and get a job. I wanted to learn another language. China is increasingly influencing the world, which is why I thought it was also a wise decision professionally to move to China, experience the culture, and learn the language.
Okay, Ashley. Awesome. Thank you so much. The other alum on the phone who is actually still in Hunan is Tommy Held. Tommy, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, I hope all of this comes across okay and not interrupted at all by my connection. Good evening to everyone. It's nice to talk with anyone that's thinking about the program or is already committed. I went to University of Michigan, and there I studied public policy, and I had a lot of classes about international affairs. And so I had read and studied a lot about Asia, but obviously it's quite different when you're actually here. Soon after graduating, I taught for about 4 months in southern India through the organization ISEC. It provides internships and other work and study abroad opportunities to university students or recent alumni. And that would lead me in about a year and a half or 2 years after returning to the US from India to search for and apply, and then decide to join the WorldTeach China program. After I taught in India for about 4 months, I worked mostly in politics, in Democratic campaigns in the States. And as much as I loved that, I wanted to continue to get more of a global perspective and return to Asia. And I had thought about Peace Corps, but I liked the ability to be more country specific with WorldTeach. And I actually read something that Nicholas Kristof from the New York Times, he wrote about, briefly mentioned WorldTeach in one of his columns a couple years back. So that's kind of, I guess, did it for me. Being at a little lesser known program than Peace Corps. Um, so there are several aspects that I could go into later if people have questions that made me put my resources into WorldTeach rather than Peace Corps. And then now it's after 3 years, 1 as a volunteer, 2 independent contract. It's got me on the path to going to graduate school this coming fall. I'll be studying in the States, and I'll be studying international affairs. So it's definitely changed my life trajectory in a tremendously positive way.
Thank you, Tommy. That's really a cool story and a journey that you're on and continuing. Where are you starting your graduate school program?
In DC, the Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
That's exciting. I'm sure bittersweet to be leaving your home from the past 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to move along here and quickly go over WorldTeach in China as a whole and some of its history. So in partnership with the Hunan provincial government, the Department of Education, WorldTeach China began 13 years ago in 2003. We wouldn't be in China without this partnership, as WorldTeach only works in communities where we've been invited. Our strong relationship with the government has enabled our program to continue despite heightened restrictions on foreign teacher visas. Other organizations have failed to acquire visas for their teaching fellows to go to China and instead send them to WorldTeach because our ties with the government are so strong, which shows that WorldTeach volunteers are requested in high demand. You'll see a list here as to a few of the reasons why our volunteers are in need in China. You will find many native English speakers and teachers in major cities like Shanghai and Beijing, but schools in the Hunan province have less resources to secure native English teachers. Therefore, you will find local Chinese English teachers who don't speak English very well, nor have the confidence to speak with their students, which will of course affect student learning in college entrance exams, which will test English skills. Serena, do you want to add anything on the relationship between WorldTeach and the provincial government, or in general, why you think there's a need for our volunteers specifically in the Hunan province?
Yeah, so we, like you said, we have a very strong relationship with the education department in the Hunan provincial government. I think that partially why our volunteers are so sought after is because WorldTeach goes above and beyond to make sure that they are trained. And so something that I've learned from personal experience is, sometimes you come in with good intentions because you want to provide a service for people. But teaching is not easy. It's something that people often go to school for 4 years or more to do. WorldTeach works really hard during orientation for mid-service conference, for end-of-service conference, to provide best teaching practices to our volunteers, so that when they first enter the classroom, they have the ability to teach successfully. And so a lot of people, in China, a lot of people come here, and it's very easy for them to find English jobs at training schools, but they have no training to teach English. And so because our volunteers have training, the schools respect them more and respect our organization. And just essentially that allows, for our reputation to grow, and then more people want to partner with WorldTeach. So because our volunteers have done such good work and they're so highly trained, people want them.
Okay, Serena, great, thank you. Failure to prepare is preparing to fail. So I like that part of WorldTeach that we do consistently in our programs of 4 weeks at a minimum of intensive training of both language training, teacher training, health and safety precautions, and then some cultural immersion, which we'll go into in detail after. Thank you so much for sharing that. As we move along here to our next slide, we talk about funding and support for the volunteer. This is one of our more important topics to cover, being the support for the volunteer, the funding received, and what the volunteer is responsible for. We're just now in the process of signing a new contract with Hunan provincial government, so the structure had recently changed. You'll see up top that the Hunan government funds the majority of our program, and our model for our programs is mostly about $10,000 per volunteer. Upon completion of the program, the volunteer will receive $500 travel allowance from the Hunan government, but first, the volunteer purchases their own airfare to and from China and pays a $500 volunteer fee to WorldTeach. And that covers your visa costs, other parts here, your housing, as well as various other sources, as you can see, health and emergency evacuation insurance. Our volunteers do a lot of fundraising in their local community to help with the cost of the airfare and the volunteer fee. WorldTeach can provide you with fundraising ideas and can connect you with previous alumni who were successful in raising all of their volunteer fee. And the good news is you'll be receiving the $500 travel allowance at the end of the year. So relatively, we have 11 current year-long programs for WorldTeach, and 5 of our 11 are fully funded, and one of them is for China, because you basically look at the $500 program fee and that $500 travel stipend that cancels out the cost of the entire program. So again, the volunteer fee of $500 plus the funding from our partner covers your China work visa, housing, monthly stipend of about $470 at this time, and as far as the currency exchange with the yuan, and emergency evacuation insurance, orientation and training conferences, field staff, and a remote teacher quality coordinator to provide support for lesson plans and teaching resources. We'll touch more on our training aspects next, which is a major pillar of our volunteer support. So we look here, first off, I'm sure many of you are thinking who are on the line, whether you've been accepted or contemplating doing a volunteer teaching program. As you've never taught before, how will you know what to do? And as mentioned by Serena, WorldTeach takes their orientation training very seriously, which as mentioned is the first month upon arriving to China. The group will have extensive teacher training sessions each day, focusing on things like creating lesson plans, assessments, classroom management, teaching English as a foreign language techniques. You'll look specifically at the education system in China, and at the end of orientation, you'll complete a short teaching practicum and receive feedback on your teaching from fellow volunteers and field staff. Volunteers will also receive a curriculum that has been designed specifically for the schools and students that we teach in China, that is in line with what the Ministry of Education is currently teaching there. Each volunteer has access to teacher quality coordinators in the U.S. office who you can contact, and they have assistance with lesson plans, assessments, providing you additional resources. And during orientation, volunteers will also have daily Chinese language immersion classes because the majority of our volunteers won't know the language before arriving to the country. You'll see that all of our placements are teaching conversational English in middle schools, but perhaps not the student age that you normally associate middle school with. Students are between the ages of 12 and 18. In China's educational system, the distinction between public and private schools is much more obscure than the United States and many European countries. While there are a few private schools in major cities catering to a growing middle class, almost all primary and secondary schools in China are overseen to some degree by the government. Serena, since you oversaw all the volunteers and their schools, in general, what sort of resources are most classrooms equipped with or lacking? And what is the average class size?
Yeah, so most classrooms, they're equipped with a projector. Some classrooms, increasingly more, they have smart boards. They have, I guess, kind of computers. They have computers in the classroom. So if you decide to use technology for your lesson planning, you can like plug in your USB or plug in your computer, and then that connects to projector, and you can use that for your lessons if you chose. There are a lot of teaching resources outside of the classroom as well, in the sense that there are a lot of stationery shops where you can buy paper and get creative if you're not someone who likes to use technology. But other than that, in terms of your second question, class sizes can vary. So they can get as small as 30 in some schools, but that's not very common. Average-wise, you can have a class of about 50 to 60 students. And the reason why middle schools age from 12 to 18 is because they actually consider junior high school and high school middle schools. So even though we differentiate them in the US, they're just all called middle schools in China. So you won't usually have a 12 and 18-year-old in the same building, just to clarify a little bit. But yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Serena. A couple questions were coming in from some people who are attending the webinar, and what we'll do is we'll address all those questions at the end. So hang in there, be patient. I promise we will address them one by one. Next, we'll just ask Ashley quickly. Will you tell us about where and who you were teaching in China, and if you had taught before joining WorldTeach?
Ashley speaking. Before WorldTeach, no, I had no prior experience in teaching of any age or in any setting. WorldTeach completely equipped me with the tools that I needed to teach back then and the teaching that I do now, because I also teach foreign expats in my country English as a second language. And I also have WorldTeach to thank for that opportunity as well. Teaching in China, I taught for Yali Middle School, Nanya Middle School. It had just become a public school when I started teaching there. So it was a transition. Some of the things I had to deal with when I was teaching at Nanya Middle School was the fact that technology wasn't always working or always available, but I was one of the special cases too because I had air conditioning in my classroom. So depending on where you're situated, I personally didn't have a smart board, but I also had a projector which worked out just as good. And some of the class sizes, I had friends who had about 75 students to teach in a classroom. I had about 25 because the way my school had done it was that they divided the classes. So there would be 75 students in room 1205, but I would teach half the class and then another teacher would teach half the class. And so sometimes you'll have to deal with a huge class size, just like Serena had said, or you'll deal with half of that class, which has its own obstacles in its own way. You get some benefits, you have to take on some obstacles. But WorldTeach completely readied us for that because at the end of practicum, we had to teach a class full of kids. And so it's kind of like simulated, so we weren't just thrown to the dogs, for a lack of better words.
Thanks, Ashley. So what would you say, and then I'm going to ask a couple questions to Tommy. What would you say was the biggest cultural challenge for you in the classroom? Yeah, what was the biggest cultural challenge for you, Ashley, when you went in with especially that large number?
Mike, the largest cultural challenge would to be a minority when you used to being part of the majority. In terms of the class, you said?
Yeah, no, I would say as far as in the classroom specifically, it's dealing with such a large number and maybe some of the Confucius background of China tradition as far as how the classroom dynamics went. What was that cultural challenge inside the classroom?
For me, there wasn't much of a cultural challenge inside of the classroom because the students are more so well behaved because they fear their head teacher. So once you mention, if you're bad, I'm going to tell your head teacher, you get all of the students trying to make the more rude students behave. Not to say to use head teacher as a classroom tool all the time, but when students tend to get out of hand, that is normally the best way to handle it. Not that you have to go and tell their head teacher, but just the thought alone tended to settle the class. The only thing that I found also the only other thing that I found that was challenging in terms of culture is the fact that sometimes your classes aren't considered important. And so math teachers during the end of the year, they would tend to take your students because they need extra time in math. So oral English classes are sacrificable. I would put me and my other fellow world teachers would put our foots down because we believe that our classes are important, and we would demand that we have our students again. And sometimes it's just a matter of talking to the head teacher and saying, you know, tell me if you need them for extra time or something like that, because to just take your students and you're sitting in class waiting for them and they never show up is a bit annoying. But that was, yeah, those two were pretty much the only cultural differences that I had to climb over.
Okay, thank you, Ashley. And Tommy, you're still, of course, there and teaching, but what did you struggle with the most initially in the classroom? How was the English level of the local Chinese English teachers?
I guess the local Chinese teachers, I guess at each school, there's always going to be one or two that you can always understand, and on a nearly pretty much fluent level from my experience. Most of the other ones, from my experience, they're going to be pretty shy. The Chinese English teachers, in terms of using English with you, but if you do need to converse with them or resolve an issue in English with them, they'll be more than happy to help you. So I personally haven't had problems with the level of English with the Chinese teachers or the Chinese English teachers. When I first started, I guess the major issues for me in the classroom, one was adjusting to the culture of discipline. And I don't mean, I guess sometimes it was a shock to see a little bit of physical discipline from the Chinese teachers in their offices, and it's not severe, but it's just more than you would be allowed in American classroom, or like yelling, and that's not something that is compatible with my personality in terms of executing, and I'm not one to ever yell at a class or hold them and tell them to sit in silence for a certain amount of time. I adjusted to that by creating my tracking system, which I learned from orientation and changed in the first weeks and months of the school year, of using 1 through 10 on the board, and that would directly impact the class grade, because at the end of each class they would give you a notebook to have you write a grade at the end of each class, as they would for every other teacher of the day. And you could see there would be spaces for 8 or however many classes they have each day. And pretty uniformly, it's probably going to be 10 for every other class, unless they're did something completely terribly out of hand. But usually, if you make it clear that that class score is going to be what you write in that notebook for their class, that will be something that will be effective in controlling the class level. And I guess the other part is the unique dynamics of each class. It takes, I guess it's easy to hear this, and also in orientation you would hear this again and again, but once you're in the classroom, And once you're at the school, it's easier to understand that each class is so different in terms of their personality and behavior level. Because from the 2 schools that I've worked at the start of each school year, they are sorted into each class by behavior and academic level. And that means if I'm teaching 12 to 14 classes a week and see them once a week, then I'll have like maybe three or so top angel classes that I'll never have a problem, that I'll never have to reference the 1 through 10, that they'll always be little angels. Then maybe 3 or 4 middle classes where I'll have to use 1 through 10, but I'll rarely get frustrated. And then maybe two or 3 lower level classes that will be more frustrating at times, but you can't take it personally because that is often how they are with other teachers and not just with you. And you have to realize that it's mostly because those students are grouped accordingly, and sometimes it's a little self-reinforcing.
Okay, thank you, Tommy. So both,
Nolan?
yes,
Sorry, can I jump in to clarify 2
yes,
things?
sure, of course.
Yeah. Oh, okay, great. So I know you asked me how many students per classroom. I think something else to clarify is that with our program, usually what happens is volunteers are given a grade. So for example, junior 1, and then they will teach all of the classes in that grade, which is what Tommy is referencing. So usually what happens is volunteers will create 1 lesson plan per week, and then they will teach it to each of the classes. And then the other thing that I wanted to clarify was what is this head teacher? And the head teacher is basically a buffed up version of a homeroom teacher. They're just responsible for the entirety of the class at all times. And I guess one more thing that I would just like to throw in is actually corporal punishment is actually illegal in China. So usually you will never see like a teacher hitting a student, but they may have them do like push-ups or something, or like to carry something. So that's not to say that there aren't cases of corporal punishment, but I think maybe that would be more encompassing of what physical punishment may entail.
Okay, Serena, thank you. That corporal punishment part that came up was that's good. I'm glad you gave that clarification. That sometimes would be prevalent in different countries, and I appreciate the exact part of that it's illegal in China. And so again, that's some information from both Ashley and Tommy, as well as Serena, with clarifications. As you'll see on the bottom of the sheet here, as we'll continue to move on with other questions and other parts of the program, there is a TEFL certification that's involved as part of our programs. This is an optional certification, which is an additional $350. And if you've done research on TEFL programs, you know this is significantly more affordable than most, which average around $1,000 or so. The TEFL certification will enable you to find full-time paid teaching positions in China or other places overseas after your year with WorldTeach has ended. Many of our volunteers do stay in country, like, for example, we have Tommy, after their year and continue teaching. It is important to note, as you're considering to do this, that you are full-time teachers, so you could be in class teaching for 20, 25 hours a week, and as mentioned with Serena, specifically in China, that 1 lesson plan per week with a grade level and having multiple classes that are coming in. So when school is in session, you are in session, and when school is on vacation, you're on vacation. We can talk about vacation and traveling during the Q&A session as well. But as we're continuing along, we'll move on to the next slide here. So we see a lot of information that comes on here. If and when you're accepted, you'll fill out a volunteer profile form where you list your preferences and what age students you want to teach and what sort of environment you want to live in. For example, whether you prefer to live and work near other volunteers or if you want to be further away. Based off your preferences and experiences, your field director, country director, Serena, will then place you according to where she thinks you'll be most successful. You'll usually find out this placement 1 month before departure for China. All of our volunteers will be in the Hunan province, which could be the capital city of Changsha, which both Tommy and Ashley served in, or smaller cities, which may still be quite big at 1 million people or so, or potentially rural placements. All volunteers will live in teacher apartments on or near school grounds, usually in your own apartment, but near other teachers, volunteers, and otherwise. You'll see the list of amenities here, which is very comfortable for China and for WorldTeach placements in general. Housing and utilities, which are listed here, are provided by your schools. This particular year for 2016, we expect to have about 35 teachers in Hunan, China. And we'll go on to Ashley and Tommy. Ashley, first, Ashley and Tommy were both in Changsha, while Tommy is still there, right? Is that correct, Tommy? In the city capital?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So they're pretty urban areas with over, again, 7 million people. To our estimates. Ashley, can you explain how your location affected your experience in China?
In terms of the amenities that I was afforded or living on campus?
All those factors about living in that urban center of Changsha, what you were exposed to, what was life potentially outside of the classroom and outside of teaching. How did living in an urban setting affect you and some of the experiences you had?
It was very comfortable for the most part. My bedroom was furnished. I had a Western toilet, which I was very thankful for. Kitchen was fully stocked, mostly from volunteers in the past. They normally, don't take their stuff with them, so you'll get maybe a blender if you're lucky, an ironing board or something along those lines, things that other teachers have left behind for you to use. Electricity was never a problem. It was always on. My power had never gone out when I was teaching in China. My air conditioner was working, and if it wasn't, I could always go to my liaison, which is the person that you are given as a go-to if you have issues in China. If I have any issues with my housing, just go to my liaison and tell him, listen, it's winter, I'm from the Bahamas, this heating needs to be fixed or I'm gone. That's a joke. I would not leave, but you get the gist of what I'm saying. I would always have cold running water or hot water, which was a blessing because some of your students don't even have hot water. Bed linens I purchased myself. They're cheap and available, and all of the places, even the volunteers that I had visited, all had washing machines and TV and internet. All of the fellow volunteers that I visited, even in their rural areas, had access to internet and different amenities just like I had. I was very lucky when it came to my placing because I was placed right next to the fast train, which is a traveling hub, and I could go from anywhere, like even to just Hong Kong, just in a few hours, because my house was literally right next to the fast train. All of these amenities made my life comfortable, and it made me want to stay, because I did. I stayed in China for about 2 years before I came home. And it's pretty much standard for everyone. Again, when you visit your other could I say co-workers, your colleagues, when you visit your other colleagues in their placements, you're maybe gonna get a little bit jealous. Oh, I don't have a front room that's this big, or I don't have an AC and I don't have an air conditioning unit in every single room. But then you're gonna notice things where if your house is too big, you're not gonna be able to heat it up all the way. Everything's a give and take when it comes to China, and everything I took as a blessing.
Thank you, Ashley. Yeah, your peoples, your coworkers. So, Tommy, just comparing, because you are in the same setting, can you compare your experience with Ashley's? Can you tell us what's the best and worst part about your housing when you were with WorldTeach, or about being in the capital city? And why did you decide to, so this is the third question, I guess, why did you decide to change grades after your first year of service? So we can kind of go one by one there.
I guess in terms of housing, I had a pretty similar experience to Ashley. My first year, volunteer year, I didn't have any major issues with my housing. I had it was, I guess the year before, it had been, the foreign teacher apartments had been refurbished, so there were no problems. And I guess about living in the capital city, I guess the downside, the downside and the upside are kind of the same thing. It's really up to you how much you want to immerse yourself. If you want to use English, if you want to feel comfortable using English every day and most or even all of every day in your interactions, then that's up to you. It might be difficult to buy certain things from a lot of certain vendors, but in terms of the people you interact with, that's a choice you make. But from my experience, most, if not all volunteers and people I still know here make the choice to use their Chinese as much as they can, or as much as they feel comfortable, at least a little bit every day. And some of my some fun moments I have almost every day are using Chinese at the local vegetable market, just a 3-minute walk from my apartment. It's just a little way that I like to immerse myself in the local culture and do as much cooking and sometimes even Hunan style cooking when I can. What was the other question?
Just the last part of you had mentioned that you changed your grades after your first year. Was this a conscious decision or something that you were just given as your assignment for your second and third year, just thinking about the age of your students?
It was mostly an assignment. My first year, I got very used and comfortable to about the equivalent of 10th graders, about 15-year-old students. And that's, I think more than half of volunteers end up teaching 15, 16-year-old students. And then my school that I ended up teaching at last year and this year, it ended up being that I would need to teach 11, 12-year-olds if I wanted to teach there. And I was, not gonna lie, I was very nervous and apprehensive about how I would adjust to their energy and to their enthusiasm, and sometimes being quite louder and rambunctious than 15, 16-year-olds. But I got quite used to it in the first 2 months, and now I actually prefer the younger kids over the 15, 16-year-olds.
Okay, thank you, Tommy. Moving along, Ashley, back to you. What was your average weekend like? What activities did you participate in outside of school, and how did you immerse yourself in the community?
In order to immerse myself in the community, what I would do is I would have demo classes where I would invite some of the Chinese teachers to come in and see what it is that I do with the kids. And by extension, I would make friends and, cook them foreign foods, Western foods, whether they be American or Bahamian or from the Caribbean. And they would invite me to their homes and they would create Chinese dishes or teach me how to prepare Chinese dishes. And, you know, when you go out, you know, we're all adults, go to the bar, and you make friends at the bar, or you just meet different foreign expats that share with you some of those nitpicky things that maybe your field director or your assistant field director may not be able to share with you. It's all a learning experience and a melting pot. The other question was, oh, I forgot it. Apologies. What was the second question?
That's okay. No. So I was just thinking about your average weekend, what activities you did, how did you immerse yourself? Did you get a chance to travel? That's another question I have an idea. In general, and you kind of touched on it, but you can elaborate as much as you'd like. How did you create a life for yourself there, and did you find it difficult? So, I mean, those are some other parts to it as well.
Creating a life for myself there was definitely one of those things that you have to prepare for ahead of time. Bring your favorite pictures of your family, calendars, anything to just fill up the house so it doesn't feel empty. The thing about it is I did get to travel a lot. Like I had previously said, my house was literally right next to the fast train. You have to budget, of course, because if you want to take the fast train, you're going to need a pretty penny in order to go to all of the different provinces that also have fast train stations. But it's literally sitting down in comfort for hours, traveling around China if you can afford the fast train ticket. Also, you have the regular train station that they now have in Changsha, that is, they now have what is it called that the Bahamas doesn't have? A metro station. So it's like a subway line that goes straight through Changsha. Since I was there, they only had one line and they were working on line 2. I don't know if Serena can further enlighten you guys on what the subway system looks like in Changsha now. But I traveled all over. Still only one line?
As of now, yeah.
As of now. And I used to visit Serena because me and Serena did our volunteer year together. I used to visit her in Anren. I used to visit all of my friends and colleagues all over the place. And it was great because you get to learn the specifics of each little city. For example, there's this place called Tsili, which would probably be categorized as a rural village because it had about 1 or 2 roads, but they were famous for oranges. So I would come back to Changsha with just a bunch of oranges to last me for the rest of the week. Not that oranges weren't available anywhere else, but it was really nice to find out which province was known for maybe shoes, which city was known for shoes, or which city was known for oranges, or which city was known for different little things. It makes this big character. Hunan becomes it's a character all in itself. And that's one of the things that moving to China and traveling, not just during your weekend, but during the holidays, because as soon as you get there in October, you get a week-long holiday that you can do almost anything in.
Great, Ashley. Thank you so much. Tommy, back to you. Did you know any Mandarin or before starting the program? And how did you feel about your language skills by the end of your first year, at least? I'm sure it's a different story now, but tell us a little bit about that.
I came to WorldTeach with absolutely no Mandarin, and it caused relatively few frustrations, and by the end of the year, I felt more comfortable in fairly simple daily interactions. Now I think I definitely could have given it more effort, spent more time my first year with Chinese, and stuck to a good Chinese teacher, which is one of the best things you can do when you're living here. Finding a quality Chinese teacher you get along with, and you can find a workable textbook. But the orientation got me off to a good start, and it's one of those things that's really up to you, that how much time you put into it. If you want to place it as a priority, then you're going to see the rewards from it, and it's going to make your experience all that much richer.
Okay, thank you, Tommy. So Serena, back to you. What sort of healthcare access do people have near their placements? And from there, can you address safety in Hunan, which I imagine will differ between the larger cities and the villages that volunteers are in?
Yeah, so every site that we are at, there is some sort of hospital nearby, even the rural sites that the liaisons know where it is, and if there is an issue and the volunteer. Okay, maybe I should start by saying there isn't a primary health, a primary doctor system, so you won't see like clinics very often in Hunan. So if someone is sick, even if it's for a cold, they often go to the hospital. So at every site, there is a hospital that the liaison's aware of that is fairly nearby. So if there is ever an emergency where a volunteer needs to go to the hospital, or even like a small thing where like they have a cold, their liaison can take them. In Changsha itself, there is what they say is the best hospital in southern China. So there's also that hospital available for any larger emergencies. But it's not, even in the rural sites, it's not so rural that you don't have access to healthcare. In terms of safety, I think that, and maybe Ashley and Tommy could speak to this as well. I think one of the biggest safety concerns, I guess, are thieves. So whenever you're traveling, just making sure to hold on to your wallet or put your purse in front of you when you're on the bus, or when you're eating dinner, don't put like your bag behind you. Another common safety issue is, I guess, cars. Rules of the road don't function here the way they might in some other countries. So always just being aware of your surroundings, and there might be a motorbike on the street that you're walking on. I think those are the main safety concerns. But I also would say, like, keep in mind, like, even though you're in another country, and China is relatively safe, because they do put a lot of extra care in making sure that foreigners don't come across any of these issues, because of course they don't want to lose face as a country. So even though it's relatively safe, your safety is also in your hands. So don't go and do anything like super crazy that you're likely to get hurt, or just always be aware of your surroundings, especially for women, because there are always safety concerns for women, I think. So just keep your head about, but the main concerns might be cars, motorbikes, and thieves.
Thank you, Serena. So have an antenna of your awareness of where you are, and then also make sure you look both ways before you cross the street. It's good. Good advice. So you've seen before that the monthly stipend is approximately $470 US. It's one of the highest stipends we have in our WorldTeach programs. Serena, can you speak to the cost of living in China and Hunan, and how volunteers deal with this stipend?
Yeah, so living in the city is slightly more expensive than living in a rural area. The stipend has actually gone up in the past couple of years. I think for Tommy's year, as well as Ashley and my year, it was lower, and then the Department of Education, in their graciousness, wanted to give the volunteers a raise. So I think that the $3,000 can definitely cover the necessities of life, and you'd even be able to save money on that 3,000. So what a lot of volunteers do is they finance their spring festival trip based off of their stipend money. So for spring festival, you'll get approximately a month off of school, and a lot of volunteers decide to like travel in Southeast Asia or around China, and so a lot of that money does come from like saving up for their stipend. Something that I would warn, and I know that Ashley mentioned this before, is, you know, you are getting a set stipend. You are all adults, so it's a matter of budgeting that stipend and prioritizing what you really want out of the year and what you really want to use that money for. So if you are really into going out and having drinks, you know, that's fine. If you really need some Pizza Hut in your life, you know, that's fine. But do recognize that that would make you know, your cost of living will go up with what you purchase, and so you won't be able to save as much. So if you're like cooking yourself every day or eating in the school cafeteria, because the food is also cheaper, and personally I like the food cafeteria in the cafeteria, then you'll be able to save a lot more. So it's definitely, you know, enough to get by and save money, but it just depends on your own spending habits.
Okay, thanks, Serena. Moving along from this next part, the application process as well as volunteer qualifications, and then we'll kind of look at some of the questions that were placed before as the people were signing up for the webinar, as well as we've gone through it. Volunteer qualifications. So applicants for our year-long programs like China must be native English speakers of any nationality and hold a bachelor's degree. You do not have to have teaching experience. However, a commitment to serving and learning and a flexible attitude are musts. You do not need to know Mandarin, but it will not hurt or help your application. The required application items are listed here on the slide as well as on our website, and the process concludes with a phone or a Skype interview. It's actually mostly by Skype now with our admissions director. Applications will be accepted until May 1st, so about 3.5 weeks from now, and the decisions are usually made 2 to 3 weeks after the application is complete. Volunteers will be departing in early August and returning in July 2017. So moving on to our Q&A part, a couple questions that came in. This one first I'll address to Serena. How do volunteers go about grocery shopping and preparing their own food? Is there Wi-Fi on the school campus? So this was a verbatim from one of our attendees. Can you address that?
Yeah, so most school campuses do have Wi-Fi, and most site placements have Wi-Fi in your own apartment. So Wi-Fi shouldn't be a problem. You might want to buy a VPN because some websites are blocked in China. So even to attend this webinar, I need to turn on my VPN. But you shouldn't have trouble accessing Chinese internet at all. In terms of buying food, usually there's like a wet market nearby. You can just go and they have all their veggies out, and like they have like hanging meat. It's very fresh, to say the least. And you just go and you kind of like, how much is this? And they'll tell you, and then you buy as much as you want and pay for it, and it's fairly cheap. If you buy the vegetables and the food that's in season, and maybe not buy like blueberries in like the winter or something. Maybe, I don't know when blueberries are in season, but the point is you can go to the wet market. There's also supermarkets, so if you feel more comfortable going there, you can go to supermarkets. They have a bunch of Western supermarkets, so you can also find cheese in the bigger cities because their cheese is not very common in China in general. But you know, I mostly eat at home, and it's mostly from food from the wet market. And then I was also at a rural placement, so if anyone has any questions about that, you can ask me. But then even in my rural placement, you know, I would just go to the market. You know, I found the one place that had chicken breast and just bought veggies and stir fry all the time. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Serena. That sounds delicious. I'm actually hungry back on the East Coast of the United States, so I'm ready to eat some good food. not the same quality food you're going to have probably, but how do you, a next question that came in was, how do you reset an application that was started a couple years ago? A resume looks different. Just to address this quickly, you just send your new resume to admissions@worldteach.org, and we'll be able to add that to your application and get it going for you. The next question, I'll go back to Serena real quick. As a WorldTeach volunteer, this question did come in. Is it possible to tutor private students in free time?
Yeah, so private tutoring is illegal in China. And so basically how it works out is your visa is tied to your contract with your school. So if you're working outside of your contract, it's basically working outside of your visa. And so you can get kicked out of the country for that. So if you want to like tutor and then, you know, the family that you're tutoring invites you to dinner, like that's fine, you know, but you cannot have monetary gain from private tutoring because it's against WorldTeach policy and also against the law in China.
Okay, Serena, that's good. Thank you. The next question I'll address to both of the alums, either Ashley or Tommy. The question goes, I think I'd like to get an e-bike to get around. Did any other volunteers buy a bike? Is it cheaper than taking public transit? Would one of you maybe like to address that, and if you have before?
You go ahead, Tommy. I've never purchased a bike, so maybe Tommy. No.
I would say I've never been short of public transportation options here, whether it's bus, long distance bus, train, fast train, flights, taxi, motorbike. I guess if I was on a more rural site, I think I would be more inclined to ride a bicycle since there's less traffic. If you come here and find that you have the funds for e-bike and you find it convenient for getting around town, then by all means try it out. But I think you'll be impressed with the in terms of moving within towns and within cities. I would never short of options, buses and trains.
Okay, thank you, Tommy. A couple more questions for Serena, then I'll kind of address the last ones and wrap it up. Questions came in as far as the logistics of travel and traveling into China. Serena, if you could take us in kind of the journey as they're coming to China, as a future volunteer is coming in and they're flying in, where would they be flying into and what is the process as far as transportation?
Yeah, so usually what we do is we partner with the Department of Education to have 2 pickup times for volunteers that are coming. So the WorldTeach home office will send, I guess, time periods that if you arrive within these time periods, we would be able to pick you up at the airport and then drive you to the hotel that you would be staying at for orientation. So if you book your flight within these times, which would be, I guess, most convenient both for you and for us as we are renting a bus to come pick you up, then you can get on this bus and we'll drive you to the hotel. For those who do not book their flight, and we ask that you fly into the Changsha airport. For those who fly into the Changsha airport but don't make these times, there is a bus that goes from the airport to the train station. And that bus is about like 15 kwai, which translates to like $2, $2.5. And then from the train station, you can take a taxi, and that would be about like 10 kwai, so like another $2 to get to the area that we will be staying in. And then sometimes, depending on the time, the field director would be able to make an extra trip to the airport and then pick those volunteers up. but usually we ask that volunteers try to make it within the time frame given. And then for any volunteers that are flying into anywhere besides Changsha, they will have to make their way to Changsha, and then we can help navigate their journey to the hotel afterward.
Thank you, Serena. That's very, very thorough, and those logistics would be shared with you as you were both accepted and confirmed into the program. Another question that came in, I'll give to Serena before I do kind of a summary of some of the questions is there a dress code for the volunteers when they're teaching inside the school?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting because you'll see Chinese teachers and what they wear. So like a lot of teachers will go in jeans, or in general, China tends to be very conservative up top, but not so much below. So you'll see teachers in like fairly short skirts and like fishnet like stockings or something along those lines. So the dress code more comes from WorldTeach's side, and so that we ask volunteers dress semi-professionally, though they can take a look at their Chinese teachers if they're not sure. But for men, either like polo shirts or like khaki pants. You don't need to be in a full suit and tie. For women, just like having a blouse, maybe slacks or like a skirt. Where if you do wear jeans to class, maybe having something more like formal up top, but we're not asking that you guys dress to meet like the ambassador or something. And that would also be shared during the pre-departure logistics. So we give like a list of things we suggest volunteers bring.
Okay, Serena, great. Thank you so much again, all those thorough answers. So a couple of questions that came in, which I'll confirm, is there was a question about the stipend and what it actually was, and yes, in fact, at this moment, as far as with the currency exchange, would come out to about $470 per month. Question about being near native, but not a native speaker. My best recommendation for this particular applicant who is near native and has done some work in the United States is to submit your application and begin. And then as we go through the application process and interview, we can tell from there as far as the native speaking and make sure that that fits up with our partners' requests in Hunan. The next part was a request to join the program late, and unfortunately, due to training and logistics and the time when you would start in school, you cannot join the program late, which was requested in September. As requested, there are 35 volunteers that have been requested by our partner for this upcoming contingent for 2016. And then finally, a question came in regards to potentially leaving a bit early in mid-June of 2017. That is kind of near the time when the program ends. My advice to you would be to begin your application, and again, going through the application process and talking to our admissions team, as well as to our program directors here in our office, and we would be able to make a decision for you if that would be potentially plausible. Those were the main questions that came in. Just to go through and kind of wrap from here, thank you so much for Ashley and Tommy for joining us. Tommy, especially from China, and Ashley from the Bahamas, and taking time out of their schedules to speak about their experiences, as well as Serena. Serena, thank you so much. I know it's early and the days are long as being the field director and country director in Hunan. So we appreciate everybody for attending as well, and thank you so much to all of the alumni as well as Serena, the country director, for assisting and answering the questions that were here today. As you'll see on here, you can read reviews, and if you're considering doing something like this, as you've heard, do your diligence and have resources that you can look at as far as reviews from alumni, which you can see. Any other additional questions, or if you'd like to talk to some of our China country experts, you can email admissions@worldteach.org. And you can find various day in the life videos as well as a recording of this webinar on our YouTube page, and then go to our worldteach.org site, which has relaunched over the past 2 days after many, many years of being in the dark ages in regards to a quality website, which is interactive. So it is new and been launched the past 2 days, as well as on any of our social media outlets. So thank you everybody for attending, and we hope to see you in WorldTeach China in Hunan. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
One second.